Welcome to Morty Vicar with
Wayne Massey.
and James Stevenson.
It's a podcast about culture, theology, and life. We talk about what's happening in the world around us. We try and avoid too much football. And we talk about how we think about that biblically, and then we apply it to our everyday, ordinary lives.
Yesterday in the news, as we were scrolling through trying to find something to talk about, we came across the news that there's a new Banksy in London.
If people don't know who Banksy is, James.
He is, according to the BBC, a Bristol-based graffiti artist. I think he's more LA-based, but
I think he's from Bristol.
Nobody knows who he is, or some people know who he is.
I've got a friend who went to school with him.
He is probably, we would describe him as a prophetic artist in terms of the world's view, in that he selectively puts stencil graffiti up, and they contain messages that speak to the world. We wouldn't necessarily say that it's anointed or godly prophecy, but he's attempting to say something.
He's cut through in a way that lots of graffiti artists haven't cut through, so therefore the art world has conversations about him, and so it seems to split. Some critics say he's a great artist, other critics say he's just a propagandist, and there's basically one meaning, and once you've got his one meaning, that's it. Whatever it is, whenever he does something, it's usually generally funny and or kind of arresting.
And speaking of arresting, there's
so my
a
favourite
theme
one,
to that.
sorry, was the one he did recently where there was an abandoned car, and have you seen that one? There's I think it's either a hippo or a rhino, basically making love to this abandoned micra. So when the micra's moved, it kind of slightly ruins the wall. But yeah, there we go.
So anyway, this latest one is an image of a protester with a placard being kind of hit or jumped on by a judge
in his full wigs,
in his
and
full
robes
with the
gavel.
Hammer, presumably about to hit or having hit the protester, and there is blood on the placard, but it's not clear where the blood has come from.
Yeah.
And we wanted to look at this because we don't know what his meaning is behind that, but we can see that this is something that comes at a time, it does come at a time prophetically for our society, because this has been a summer of protests.
Yeah, and so most people have inferred that it's in support of a Palestinian a group that supports Palestine Action that have been they've been classed as a terrorist group because they jumped the fences of, I think it was one or two British Air Force bases and daubed multi-million-pound planes in paint, and as a result have been daubed as a terrorist outfit. So therefore they had a protest in London that was banned, and I think it's about 900 people have been arrested, and then 2 days later this came out. But actually, and people have inferred that because he's done stuff on the wall, the wall that the Israelis have put up, in Bethlehem. He's done art there, and it's been inferred that it's in support of that because he's presumed to be left-leaning and therefore presumed to be pro-Gaza. Yeah. But as you pointed out, it doesn't say that, and actually there are protesters outside asylum hotels at the moment who would be thinking differently possibly about Gaza to Palestine
and
Action.
the legal systems were involved in that as well. So there was the debate about the hotel in Epping, and that went to the high courts, and I think it went to the high courts, but it was definitely involved in the legal system.
Actually, if you actually take it at face value, the point is that the judge with his gavel, and the gavel is the thing the judge brings down to declare this is the decision, is beating a protester. And so you could say it is actually a statement, because actually it's only Graham Linehan, the anti-trans activist, was arrested for a tweet he put out, that actually it could be a wider prophetic statement about how law is being used in this country to stop people speaking freely.
Yes,
so that's the cultural moment.
That's the cultural moment that we think there's a tension between that freedom of speech and how that is essentially policed, and then I don't know what the verb would be for a judge, ruled. Brain in full flow this morning.
But where we got to, interestingly, was like lying all behind that is division in society.
Yes.
And is disagreement, and is linked to everything from what's going on in Gaza. Yeah. To what's going on in hotels, to what's going on in like you could even what's going on in terms of like our deputy prime minister having to resign.
Yeah.
And
what's going on in France with the French government
which fell
falling apart,
yesterday.
and the concerns about the far right in France and the implications of that. And isn't there footage of a far right MP not receiving a handshake from anyone in Parliament as they were? So there's I was invited to invite people to a rally in the centre of Bristol, and it said, "Love refugees, hate racists." And I was like, my response was, I can't actually advocate something that involves hate. Because that's not part of what it means for us to be followers of Jesus.
Now, where we went to on this one,
yes.
So if I explain kind of where we went and then we'll unpack it, is we could, instead of going and talking about all these different issues...
We thought we'd do one hit on Morty Vicar and then kick our feet up for the rest of the term.
No. We got to the fact that division exists in our world, always, number one. And number two, the role that language plays in that. So... my daughter wrote a history paper on problems on the island of Ireland, 1916 to 2016, and what was basically the question was, what was the greatest contribution towards problems on the island of Ireland, 1916 to 2016? If you know your history, the answer is the British government, and it is. But then there are other factors. But I read it and said, this is really good. But I said one factor you could put in is the role of language, and how people use and weaponize language. And she kind of looked at me, her eyes rolled, and she said, "Dad, I'm doing my A levels, not a degree." But what was interesting was, if you think back to the island of Ireland, language was so important and remains so, and our words create worlds, and create meaning, and so what we thought we'd do is we'd say there's division, and actually and I think Banksy, it's not words but it's imagery. How do the stories we tell, the language we use, actually reinforce and create what then turns into actual harm and actual war and actual hurt and pain?
So just in this community here, we've got a bunch of people who've moved from Hong Kong to England as a result of what's been going on politically in Hong Kong. So they are political migrants, and they have had to change their names in order to function within this society. And often they've done that in order to have Western-facing names in Hong Kong, but many of them are going by different names. And so one of the things I do when I meet people from Hong Kong is I will ask them what their Chinese name is, their Cantonese name, and then they speak it out. And I try and say it back to them, and then I'll say, I just so you know, I won't be able to remember that. But it's a way of offering dignity, and we see that in Daniel, where they they're taken into exile from Jerusalem into Babylon, and they are given new names. And there's the kind of the Couch. What's his name? The guy who wrote the book on culture, Andy Crouch, says that this is like a cultural genocide that's performed on the people in Judah as the young men are taken off and given a new identity, a new name, and a new language. And so what you've just said about the Irish isn't just a head thing.
If you think about Welsh, Scots, Gaelic, and Irish, that was actually a specific policy on the part of, I'm not going to say colonial government, but some people would say that, around if I can remove culture and remove your language. So even in Ireland growing up, like for me, like English is the official language of the Irish government. And so if somebody, like my next door neighbour was called Seamus, but on all forms he had to write James. Because his, and that had its roots in control from London, which is actually, you don't write your Irish name down, you write your English name.
So language is really, really deeply important, and at an emotional level, this isn't just a concept, this is part of our identity.
So if we go on the journey, we're going to step away from language a little bit, but what we want you to be hearing is what lies behind all of this is, how do I talk to people? How do I talk about people? How do I talk about difference? How do I disagree? What effect do my words have? So division seems to be hardwired into what it is to be a human being.
Yes.
Whether it's, on Saturday I'm going to watch Bristol Rovers, and we will, 8,000 of us will spend most of the game shouting at about 500 people from Barrow, poor people from Barrow. Division is hardwired into what it is to be a human being. James, where does that come from?
It comes from Genesis 3 and the fall, and the sentence, and I will put enmity between the man and the woman, enmity, from which we get enemies.
Yep.
As a word, and it's not just between what we see written out through the rest of the scriptures is that it's not a gender-driven enmity. It is a human experience of enmity between humans. Where there is difference, there is the enemying of one another.
So like, if you think about Genesis, so what happens is the Lord God, he has the snake and he has the man and the woman, Adam and Eve, in front of him, and he begins with the snake, he begins with the devil, and he basically says enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and hers. And the correct reading there is actually, because he then goes on to say, he will crush your head and you will strike his heel, and that is first reference pointing to the cross, that actually Jesus is going to come and rescue us. And sometimes we read that and we just see that as the kind of the enmity between the devil and Jesus. But then to the woman, he talks about pain in childbearing and your desire for your husband, and he will rule over you. So there's that kind of that enmity working itself out. And the mistake, I think, that we sometimes just don't own enough is that when the fall comes, humans don't switch sides from God's side to the devil's side. They find themselves actually as kind of collateral in this big spiritual battle. And the devil doesn't want us on our side at all. As one friend of ours says, the devil knows that he's condemned to hell and wants to drag us there with him. He's not on our side. He just wants to take down as many people as possible. And so enmity is then hardwired into how we relate, not just to one another, but actually to all spiritual forces.
Yeah.
And everybody is in one kingdom, darkness or another, the kingdom of light.
Yep.
And only the kingdom of light is on your side.
So there's an extent to which when we look at the Banksy image and we look at the enemying between the protester and the judge, and we think about the multiple different stories that might be telling prophetically, as Christians, we're not surprised because we know that is the default state of creation. It might be that your experiences of living in a lovely neighbourhood and getting on with your neighbours, and actually the enemying of other people is reserved for a Saturday afternoon and a football match, or a Saturday morning. And that's probably where more enemying happens, when people watch their own children play football, and that's where all the real stuff comes out.
Yeah.
But what we can then do is we can then persuade ourselves that isn't the default state of creation, because our experience in this lovely postcode is not that. But actually, the Banksy graffiti is a reminder to us of the scriptures, which tell us that actually this is the default state of creation.
And if you're thinking, is it really enmity between us all? Is it surely just between, Jesus and the devil? You just roll forward one chapter and you get Cain and Abel, two brothers, one murders the other. And if you've grown up, as you and I have, in large households of siblings, basically most of the first 20 years of your life are spent fighting with somebody. Or maybe that was just my experience. But then then there's another. So that's that first. There's Genesis chapter 3. Yeah. Enmity is now hardwired into the system. Yeah. Although we do know that Jesus is coming to end it, we'll come on to him. And then we get this amazing kind of, I think, story of what happens when we're left to our own devices too much, which is chapter 11. What happens in chapter 11 of Genesis?
The people become proud and they say to themselves, let's build ourselves something. Let's reach up to the heavens.
Let's make a name for
ourselves. And so they build this tower, and God strikes it down and he scatters the people.
Which, until you know the kind of a bit of the context and a bit of what's going on there, sometimes seems a little bit unfair, because they're all getting on. But actually, the key is that it's some people are making a name for themselves by excluding others.
Yeah.
And so they have grouped together to do something that it deliberately excludes others in their own strength.
Yeah.
And that's where enmity becomes truly dangerous in the human heart, which is when we gang up. And it's not just, as you said, on 3 o'clock on a Saturday, but actually all the way through history when we other people. And we do that for a whole host of reasons. One of the major reasons we do it is fear, the fear of the unknown and the fear of the other, and probably the fear of who we are as well. Yeah. But we do that. We do other people. And in othering people, we are then able to speak about them in a way that I think, I'm trying to phrase this, we're able to speak about people who we other, that leaves aside the fact that outside of Jesus, everybody is still imago Dei, made in the image of God, and as such bestowed with dignity and honor. So you will see this, let's quickly go to Israel and Gaza, you will see this at the moment in the Israel Gaza situation, where whatever side anybody lands on this, it's very, very easy to other the side that you disagree with. And it's very easy to portray a side as monsters. And it's the same, and interesting enough, this nation spent most of the 20th century with a Gaza-like situation in 6 counties in Northern Ireland, and othering and the use of language is where language comes in, was key to part of that.
Yeah.
So, not every Catholic is a terrorist, and not every Catholic is a nationalist, and not every Protestant is a narrow-minded, bigoted unionist. But by creating a group that we can then we can then put you in a pigeonhole and decide what we think about you.
So we talked about the language of Palestine is used freely without distinction from Hamas, who are acknowledged as a terrorist group, without distinction from the residents of Gaza. The language of Israel is used freely. I heard it on a podcast just yesterday from a preacher that I love listening to, and it was used almost as a unilateral justification for the behaviour of the nation state of Israel as some kind of inheritors of the Israel of the Old Testament, and again that language is used as a catch-all for everyone within the nation of Israel. There's a footballer who's was it Manor Solomon who's been othered by people at his club for being Israeli. There's the cyclists who have withdrawn from the competition as well because of the persistent protesting.
But the use of language enables us to do that. It enables us to do stuff and to control and to create division. So there was a specific, deliberate policy at the height of British government in the 70s and 80s to never refer to what went on in Northern Ireland as anything like a civil war or war, because but civil disobedience. You can see lots of speeches by Margaret Thatcher about it, which is a very clever thing, because what it does is it keeps the international pressure off the UK government to say what is going on in this country, but also it denies what was in quite a strong civil rights thing. I'm probably coming out slightly, but it denies it denies the legitimacy that one side was looking for.
Yes,
they were trying to, because their language was, we're freedom fighters. But if the British government goes, no, you're just civil disobedience, and so what language does is it enables us to control, it enables us to build walls, it enables us to create worlds that then actually do lead to physical harm and physical violence.
And this is where, if you have a lower view of Genesis because you've subscribed to an understanding of the world emerging out of the Big Bang and evolution, and therefore you look at Genesis and you go, well, this is just a load of made up twaddle. You've got a problem in this situation, because you've got to get to why there is this division between us, and we want to encourage people to rediscover confidence in Genesis as a story that tells us more about us than we will ever tell about it, and that actually, I believe that Babel is a historical act. It isn't a fable, and that the breaking down of this society that is attempting to put itself in the place of God, and it says confusing their language so they will not understand each other. That's not just about understanding each other in the sense that they won't be able to understand what the other person is saying. There's an understanding that comes in compassion and empathy that enables us to be able to relate to one another. And so then that enemying that comes between Adam and Eve comes even further into the way that we relate together as society, and so we other communities.
And it's the hardest thing about the Babel story is that actually he does something which seems to increase the confusion, and you think, why would he do that? Because, well, we're headed towards the cross, and he actually does it for our own good. But let's because we can have these conversations and we can think about, like, what we all think about Trump, or what we all think about Gaza and Israel, but it lands locally. So, like, where I live, there's a park, and the park is surrounded by vans, and those vans have grown kind of, it feels like exponentially over the last few years, because where those vans used to be parked is now all permit parking. And where I live, people will talk about the van dwellers.
Yes.
And that's one group of people. But I happen to know and because spoken to a few of them, know some of them, and also know people. There's one neighbour who knows them all. That van dwellers is everything in between from a refugee, who has no home, actually to a rather kind of who's since been moved on, kind of quite dangerous character who was involved in drugs, but also recently to a guy who's pulled up in a really who's an engineer on a contract who's parked his van for a couple of months while he's doing contract, and he hasn't been able to find an Airbnb, so he's bought his camper van and is parked up for a couple of months, and is a rather lovely, but yet we say van dwellers and they're all one group of people. My favourite one was the park committee. In one of their minutes they were talking about dog poo in the park, and somebody basically said it's nobody from around here, it's everybody from Horfield who drives down from Horfield to deliberately let their dogs poo in the park. And it was just this one bit where basically in this one sentence, everybody from Horfield, they stand at the gates of the park, smoke cigarettes and let their dogs poo everywhere. That was what was said. And you're like, and you've just othered the whole part of my city.
They're protesting with minutes of a meeting rather than placards, and we know that this is going on around asylum hotels. This enemying is going on in all of the different debates that are going on at the moment. So we've got Genesis 3 and the fall. We've got Babel, Genesis 11, and its resolution. All of the resolutions to this ultimately come in
Jesus,
and then in what he does when the Spirit is poured out.
So all theologians seem to, and biblical scholars, basically it's not a leap of the imagination to go that Acts chapter 2, the speaking in all the different languages, is a deliberate prophetic sign of a reversal of what is the curse of Babel. That the confusion that had to come in at Babel to stop us really destroying one another, that's the thing that's quite shocking, is reversed when a new humanity is formed in the power of the Holy Spirit, and who don't other one another, but actually have been included, and enmity has been removed through the work of the cross and resurrection.
So I have absolutely nothing in my body that makes me want to move like a gospel choir would on a Sunday morning. But when I saw a gospel choir singing in Kampala, Uganda, 20 odd years ago, just the joy on their faces and the joy in my heart as I saw them expressing their love for Jesus as they did it, I struggle to put it into words. But there is absolutely nothing in me that wants to move like that. But I love to sing and love to make music to God. And there is something about the Spirit-filled church that across cultural, linguistic divides can recognize one another and celebrate the differences rather than enemy one another across those differences. That means that we speak of something that is going to come ultimately when we gather together on God's holy mountain from every tribe and every tongue.
Outside of Jesus, we gather around what we have in common.
Yeah.
So our nationality, we gather around, but then within that we gather around our kind of socioeconomic grouping, our education, our likes, our dislikes, and we gather around self-minded people.
Yeah.
And we live in areas, if you've got, as we to a certain extent have, if you are blessed enough to have the freedom to choose where you live, you will choose to live somewhere with people who you will get on with.
Yeah.
That is how the whole of humanity operates. And we very rarely spend time with people who are completely different to us, are not like us. And yet the church is the one place where people who have nothing in common except Jesus gather. Dr. Martin Lloyd-Jones, who was the pastor of Westminster Chapel in the 1950s and 60s, before he was converted, was a GP. And the thing that led him to faith was he would see these people coming into his surgery, and they would work out who the Christians were. And there was nothing in common except that they were Christians. And he said, there's something, what is it that unites these people who are so different?
Yeah.
And it's Jesus. And that is the enmity that comes in chapter 3 of Genesis, that is driven home because of what we want to do to one another, excluding in chapter 11, is only fixed and only solved through the work of the cross and the resurrection, and the rebirth of the Spirit, which begins at Pentecost. And so this is where we're going to get onto life, whenever we talk about where there are problems in the world and our views, and we do need to think about these things, is we need to not other people.
Yeah.
So if you are pro one side, you need to what is the best of the other side?
Yeah.
Can you do that?
Yeah.
We need to not other people, but we also need to name that actually, sadly, division is the lot of the humanity outside of Jesus. And as Christians, the only solution to whether it be you're having a fight with your neighbour about the bins, or whether it be it's two nations going to war, is actually Jesus.
Yeah. Is that where we're landing?
I think so. We normally say Jesus is the solution, so that's a good place to end.
Yeah. Thanks for listening and watching. We hope that you're able to look at a whole range of different issues through this lens of Genesis 3 to 11 and Acts chapter 2, and see the work that God is doing to bring resolution, and to be someone who can understand the other, even if they don't want to be understood, or by someone different to them, or even if you don't feel like understanding them. That is the work of the Spirit, is to break down those barriers.